Hey friend, Chris Vandeviver here from WhyLogicProRules.com, the website that helps you get the most you can out of Apple's Logic Pro. Today I want to cover a topic that has been consistently requested, and that is the topic of mid-side processing. Now, I've kind of covered this topic in the past with a previous video all about dual mono mode in Logic Pro. But that video was more about how to access dual mono mode, what is it, and how to access mid-side or left-right processing using any plugin or just about any plugin through this particular function in Logic Pro. Today's video is going to be about what is mid-side processing, how to go about it, some caveats, creative opportunities, and I'm hoping to give you a nice overview of how you can approach this technique in your own mixes. Now, mid-side processing, in a nutshell, is a slightly different way of approaching your stereo tracks. It's specific to stereo tracks, so tracks that have, two level meters going in the mixer. And in fact, if we take a look at the mixer here, and I'll just solo the beats here and I'll hit play, and we'll see on the meter that it's a stereo track because there's two peak meters that are playing around. Cool, and you see it on the stereo track. I'm pretty sure just about every track right here is a stereo track. I'm using one of the live loop grids that comes with Logic for this particular video, so you can dig into it on your own as well if you'd like to. So again, mid-side processing is where we process our stereo tracks not as a single track, but as two different channels. And in fact, stereo tracks are made up of two channels. We just saw on the peak meters, there's a left and a right channel. But not only that, there's also a mid and a side channel as well, if you chose to approach your tracks in that manner. Now, mid-side can get very abstract very quickly. It's not that abstract if you really dig into it, but it can feel overwhelming. And I would say that, most of the time you're probably not going to need this function. I would think of mid-side processing more as a corrective procedure. If you are stuck with a track that you just can't approach normally with EQ or compression or reverb or anything else, you just feel like your hands are tied, that's where mid-side processing can be a huge help. Of course, there are creative opportunities as well. It's not just corrective. So first things first, let's kind of dissect mid-side. What is the mid? What is the side? Well, I'm just going to solo, or I'm going to listen to this whole live loops grid, the first scene of it, and I'm going to open a multimeter so we can see what's going on with our project. And I'm also going to open, right before the limiter, a gain plugin in dual mono mode. And if you open a plugin on a stereo track, you should see two options, stereo or dual mono. Let's pop this open. So now we can see that our gain plugin is offering us some extra features. We have a left and a right. If we click on the gear right next to the left-right functions, we can switch this from stereo processing to mid-side processing. Now we have the mid and we have the side. Okay, let me pull that multimeter back up. And what we're going to do is we're going to reduce the level of the side content first and then the mid content, so we can get a sense for what each of these signals contribute to this entire mix. First, let's take a listen to this live loops grid and take a look at the goniometer and the correlation meter and just get a sense for what's going on. Take a listen, take a look. Okay, so we've got good stereo activity going on. The correlation meter is on the right side or the positive side of the meter. So this mix is in phase and, it sounds great. Now let's go to the side option in this gain plugin in dual mono mode. And let's reduce the gain by -96, as low as it can go on this gain plugin. I'll do it slowly so we can hear that the sides, the far left and right, are just going to disappear. And it's going to sound like we set the entire mix into mono. Take a listen. And as you can see on the goniometer, it's straight up and down, so it's exactly in mono. The correlation meter, the little line just disappears because it's in mono. And we're just getting the center or mid content. That's all we're hearing. Okay, let's do the opposite now. Let's drive down the mid content and watch the meters and take a listen. So as you can see on the meters, it is completely out of phase. It's just horizontal on the goniometer. The correlation meter is all the way to the left, so it's not in phase. And it's kind of interesting because all we're hearing is anything that's hard pan left or right. This is typically, whatever instruments you would pan hard left and right, but also like reverb and delay ambience. That's all we're hearing. And that's one of the things I want to bring to your attention here. As we play with mid-side, we are adjusting the side content and the mid content independently. We could end up causing our tracks to become out of phase with themselves or a whole mix with itself. So that's why we're taking a look at these 2 meters, just to be aware in that department. Okay, with all of this in mind, what are the practical uses for mid-side processing? Well, again, I think of it as a tool in your toolkit when your hands are tied with a stereo track. Let's just assume that we don't have access to any of these individual tracks for this mix, and all we have access to is just a stereo wave file. And we decide that the percussion or the guitars need to be a little less bright. So we need to process this using EQ. So I'm going to open up an EQ. I'll just use the channel EQ. And I'm just going to open it up as a stereo plugin because the channel EQ and the linear EQ actually offer us processing for the individual channels. So either the left only, the right only, the mid, or the side. So let's focus in on the side content and let's just watch the meter and see what it looks like. It's going to be pretty cool because you can see both the mid and the side content superimposed on one another. Let's take a look and a listen. Isn't that kind of awesome? We can see the kick activity that is down the center. It is specific to the mid content. We can see, the synths and everything. There's a lot of room that has been made, 100 hertz and below for the kick and the bass. And this allows us to approach this mix with a little more freedom. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce a high shelf and I'm going to reduce the brightness on the hard pan left and right guitars, and anything else that's in the left and right. So let's take a listen and a look. So as you can hear, I'm able to reduce some of the brightness on the guitars and everything else on the hard left and right, on the side content. So we're creating, a little less aggression in the top end. I'm not saying this mix is imbalanced. I'm just demonstrating here. And we could do the opposite. We could do the same thing for the mid content if we decided that the lead synth or the percussion was a little too bright or a little too this or too that. So let's try it right now with the mid processing. Pretty awesome. Again, we're processing more than just the percussion or more than just the guitars, but it's a little more freedom when you're stuck with just a stereo track where you can't, isolate that one specific aspect of that track, such as the percussion or the guitars. Now, when it comes to every other plugin, if it doesn't have a dedicated mid-side mode like the channel EQ and the linear EQ, you're going to have to use dual mono mode. And just about any plugin will work in dual mono mode. Almost any third-party plugin, there are a couple that don't seem to want to play well with dual mono mode or offer an option. But let's demonstrate right now. We're going to isolate the percussion track here. And I'm going to introduce a compressor in dual mono mode. And once again, we go to the gear, set it up for mid-side. And let's take a listen. Let's just couple the controls here and just reduce the threshold for both sides. So we're not hearing any sort of compression yet. We're just taking a listen to the signal. There is a shaker and more of a drum, both in the mid and the side. So let's take a listen to that. Now, maybe in this case, you decide, I want that shaker to be quieter. I don't want it so loud in the mix. But again, we have two instruments in a stereo file. Well, in this case, let me bust open the Studio VCA. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to hone in on just the mid content and try to compress just the shaker. So let's take a listen. I'll even introduce a tone of ratio here. So we can hear the shaker is now being compressed quite a bit, so it's quieter in the mix, and we're not affecting the drum too much. Now, we could also process the side content, the drum as well if we'd like. And what's cool is as long as you don't have couple mode enabled, you can actually set different compressors for both mid and side. That's pretty awesome. So let's compress that drum on the right-hand side. So now we have dynamically and tonally changed the balance of that stereo track using compression in mid-side mode. So we impacted the mid content first where the shaker is most prominent, and then that drum in the side content where it's most prominent. Now again, this is really helpful for kind of rebalancing things. And if we take a look at this Synth 1 here, and let's bust open the gain plugin in dual mono mode. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to adjust the general ambience on the side against the mid content where most of the synth lives. Take a listen. Now, maybe I decide I don't want the ambience on the sides. No problem. So we've kind of focused and narrowed this to the mono center content. But maybe we want to introduce more side. We want more ambience. Check it out. So it's like a stereo widening effect. I'm also going to open a correlation meter just so we can double check the phase or polarity of this track. We don't want it to be out of phase, so when it's played back on mono systems, it just disappears. So it's only hanging out in the left-hand side. So that's a problem. So that might not be a good solution for this track. But it doesn't always have to be corrective procedures either. It could also be, more creative tools. So with this particular synth, I'm going to open up the pitch shifter and I'm going to set it, as always, to mid-side. And I'm going to couple these so I can set everything about the same, but I don't want the mid content to be impacted. What I'm planning on doing is pitch shifting just the side content up an octave, so it kind of has a more otherworldly feel. I'm going to turn on latency compensation, and I'll set this to pitch tracking, uncouple this, go to the side content, and then I'm going to boost the semitones here of the side content only. Check it out. And now to make it a little more subtle in the mix, let's bring back that gain plugin. But in this case, I'm going to reduce the side content. Take a listen and a look. So now we've added this pitch shifted effect, but we rebalanced it so this track isn't, out of phase with itself. That's one unique opportunity, and I'm sure your brain is going is how many different directions you can take this creatively. I'm going to do one more with the guitar track here, and let's take a listen to the guitar. There's a left and a right hand guitar. They're hard panned. Cool, so maybe we want to give each guitar its own ambience. Well, in this case, even though this video is all about mid-side mode, we're going to do this in a left and right configuration using dual mono mode. So check it out. Let's go to Reverb, dual mono mode, and I'm going to leave it in left and right. And let's just take a listen. I'm actually going to reduce the right-hand side reverb to nothing. So we're just focusing in on the left-hand side. And let's adjust the reverb for the right-hand side. So in this case, I'll pick something weird like the Strange Room algorithm and take a listen. So now we've given each guitar its own ambience, even though these two guitars are baked into the same stereo track. Whereas previously, without dual mono mode, without mid-side or left-right, we wouldn't be able to process these tracks as we did throughout this video, where we apply only a reverb to both guitars, or apply compression to the entire percussion track and not just specific elements of the percussion track. So as you can see, mid-side processing affords you a lot of creative and corrective opportunities when you, again, have your hands tied behind your back. But I hope this was helpful for you. If it was, as always, I highly recommend subscribing to the YouTube channel, Why Logic Pro Rules, or subscribing on the website itself, whylogicprorules.com. Every week I'm posting new videos, new emails, and posts to help you get the most you can out of Apple's Logic Pro. Thanks so much.